So in this lesson, we're going to look at currency. We're going to look specifically at the impact that currency values have on trade, and then also exchange rates and how those operate within increase or decreasing import-exports. So first, we'll begin by looking at currency. So different countries use different forms of currency as a medium of exchange. The U.S. uses the dollar, but Mexico uses the peso, and the Japanese use the yen. So three different things. In fact, a lot of foreign countries, you'll notice with their dollars, use coins. However, these countries must be able to trade with each other, which means they must be able to exchange their currencies for one another. So there has to be a way to determine how much each currency is worth so that the trade equals out. So, for example, the US dollar is worth 18.12 Mexican pesos. It's also worth 112.8 Japanese yen. So that speaks to the strength of the various economies. It also, of course, tells you that when you're looking at this, from the value of, if the value of this product is X dollars, what's it going to take in pesos or yen to buy it? So the price of one nation's currency in terms of another nation's currency is called the exchange rate. And exchange rates allowed trade to occur across the globe as one currency can be exchanged for another. And foreign exchange markets allow for corporations and individuals so that they can convert one form of currency to another, and then buy and sell goods, foreign currency, so that businesses can produce goods in foreign markets. So foreign exchange markets basically are the markets in which people buy and sell currency. And this allows, of course, international trade to take place through the purchasing and the selling of this currency. So this website here is xrates.com. What it does is exchange rates. So notice over here in the middle, it'll tell you with the top 10 these different countries and their currencies with the US dollar at the top. So on the left here, we see the US dollar, and this is what it's equal to. So for example, a US dollar currency translates from a euro is 90 cents. If I want to go and I want to exchange a euro for a dollar, then I'm going to get back $1.10. So if I want to take the euro and I exchange it with a dollar, then I'm going to get $1.10. If I take a dollar and exchange it with a euro, then it devalues. So that's kind of what this is telling you, is that, so this column here shows us the value of the American currency in that country. And then this one would show you the value of their currency in America. So for example, the Japanese, like one US dollar will get you 6.53 Chinese yuan. And then when you bring that over here to America to exchange it, that's only going to get you, you'll notice, 15 American cents. And that's what this is telling you. Now these change constantly. You can look here, just the percentage change in the last 24 hours. You'll see how these have all gone down, whereas these have all gone up. So because we're on a flexible exchange system instead of that fixed rate with the gold, it causes exchange rates to now be far more fluctuating. So let's look at kind of the history on exchange rates. With originally we had the gold standard in the exchange rates. Since 1945 through the early 1970s, companies operated on a fixed rate of exchange. And this meant that countries set their currency values in relation to the currencies of other nations. And at this time, all countries backed their currencies with reserves of gold. So the money supply in each country was determined by the reserves of the gold they had. And then this made a fixed exchange rate pretty easy to work with, because you knew how much gold each country had in reserve, and thus you had a relative idea of how much value they had within their money supply. Now, the International Monetary Fund worked with member countries to keep the values relatively stable, and that gave importing and exporting countries the ability to always use the exchange rates to determine trade. Now, this same system allowed central banks in countries like, for example, the Federal Reserve, to affect the level of exports and imports by changing the value of their currency. So when the US went off the gold standard, other countries followed. And as a result, inflation became a whole lot less predictable, and fixed exchange rates became a lot less impractical. So we want to look at what's called devaluation. So it's when a country reduces the value of their currency within a fixed exchange system. So this reduces the country's currency value in relation to other currencies. So by devaluing the currency, you could generate greater trade. And here's how. So for example, if you devalue the currency, the price of exported goods will go down, and hence the foreign quantity demanded goes up. So you can think about it like this. When you devalue the currency, the domestic price will fall. And when the domestic price falls, that increases the demand for those goods in foreign countries. This also causes imports to become more expensive from the same perspective. If the value of our currency falls, then all of a sudden now items coming in from other countries are more expensive. They're more valuable. So that would reduce the domestic demand for foreign goods. Now, increasing the price of imports would protect domestic firms, so like we said with tariffs. However, because it reduces competition, quality and efficiency of production may suffer. So even though tariffs are designed to improve basically the total revenue and improve the price of imports, protect them from foreign firms, it doesn't necessarily say that we're going to see an improvement or even the same quality and efficiency, because with less competition comes the less of an incentive to actually produce high quality goods. So with the introduction of fiat money and of course removing it from the gold standard, one of the things that we saw was the need to create flexible exchange rates, which create a currency market so you can buy and sell currency. Now the movement of currency and value is based on, number one, the amount of goods and services that can be bought with a particular currency. And then since currency is a market, it is dictated by supply and demand. So those two things will work within currency markets to determine value. So thus flexible exchange rates are determined by the supply and demand of a particular currency. Now here's the thing though, this leads currencies to either remain the same, go up, or go down on a daily basis. We see a constant fluctuation of up and down within currencies on a daily basis because of flexible exchange rates. So when the Chinese yuan is worth $6.54 US dollars, it gives us some insight into trade. So Chinese exporters have a greater demand for US dollars than those supplied by Americans who purchase Chinese goods. As a result, the US dollar is more valuable than the Chinese yuan. So in the United States, the Chinese yuan isn't very valuable at all, but in China, the US dollar is fairly valuable. So that's how these exchange rates are going to set up. So how do these exchange rates, and being that they're so flexible, how does this affect trade? Well, a balance of trade is the difference between the value of a nation's exports and its imports. And currency exchange rates can affect this balance. And if a country's currency has been devalued, its exports become cheaper. So whenever a country's currency gets devalued, all of a sudden the goods you're selling overseas become less valuable. They lose their price. So you can think about the domestic price versus the world price in this sense. If you are an exporting country and your currency is devalued, then the domestic price is dropped below the world price by even greater rate. Now, if you're importing goods in, what happens, of course, is that world price is going to have an effect there as well, because it's going to increase the price, and thus it's going to change the way the imports and exports are working. So since the Chinese yuan is less valuable, its domestic price for many goods is cheaper, and thus it will become an exporter of goods. Now, the more valuable a country's currency, the more expensive the goods. So a result of countries with more valued currencies are importers. So like the United States is a very valuable currency. Well, what does the United States primarily do? We import. Now those with less valuable currencies thus become exporters. So they're selling their goods overseas because their prices are cheaper, whereas with the United States and our high incomes, we automatically become importers of goods because we have higher incomes on average than a lot of other countries. So when you look at this here with China's portion of the U.S. trade deficit, notice that it continued to increase. It is the lowest point in 1980, and then where it was under 10%, and to its highest point in 2005, where it reached just over 25%. So what does that mean? Well, what that means, of course, is that we see this increasing trade deficit between the two countries. We've got an issue, of course, where we're looking at the currency and the value of the currency itself. Has China's currency become devalued in order for them to sell more of their goods overseas?